Thank you for joining us today. Hello and welcome to From Lansing with Love. I'm your host, State Representative Leslie Love. Every month we discuss a different topic with interesting guests. I hope you will find this program both informative and insightful. Every 10 years, the U.S. Census counts every single person living in the United States. Getting an accurate count is critical, and it will determine many things for you and the community you live in for the next decade. Governor Whitmer signed an executive order in June establishing a complete count committee, and she has been traveling across the state to get the word out. To give you an idea of how important this is, other elected leaders are sponsoring census events to get the word out, such as Mayor Mike Duggan and Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. My guest today is Joan Gustafson, the External Affairs Officer for the Michigan Nonprofit Association and the campaign manager for the Census 2020 Michigan Nonprofit Count Campaign. So, Joan, thank you and welcome to From Lansing with Love.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so all the talk of the town as we are getting ready. This is like the Emmys meets the Grammys of counting human beings in America.
It is a huge undertaking, and it is very important, as you said. A lot of our elected officials are involved in this, as well as many other stakeholders, including the nonprofit sector. Mm-hmm. Michigan Nonprofit Association, as you mentioned, we have a long history of working in public-private partnerships with the government, and in this case, we have launched a very ambitious campaign. In fact, we started in 2017 in order to help the state get a complete and accurate count in the 2020 census. As you said, there is so much at stake for Michigan to get a complete count.
Right. Well, let's go into that. But first, I'm going to just pull us back to say, what is the census? People hear the census, what's the census? And we know it's a count, but what are we counting and why are we counting? Can you go into that?
The census is a constitutional mandate whereby every 10 years we have to do an actual enumeration or a count, as you said, of every person living in the United States. And that count of population determines two main things. Mm-hmm. The first thing it determines is our representation in not only in Washington, D.C., but also our representation here in Michigan with the number of state and representative districts. So the more people we count, the more power that we have in Washington and here in Lansing to protect the things that we care about here in Michigan. Now, we have lost over the years 2 congressional seats, and we're in danger of losing another congressional seat with this count. So we have to do whatever we can to try to mitigate that. The other big thing that's at stake for Michigan is the federal funding that we draw down as a state based on the number of people here. So we're estimating for this campaign this time around that for each person that we miss, we stand to lose $1,800 per person per year. And think about that. That's for 10 years we're stuck with these numbers. There are no do-overs. So we really need to get it right because it represents millions and millions of dollars that come into the state.
Right. And so if you could even break that down further, when we talk about those millions of dollars, what does that mean to an everyday person? So, in terms of funding for like our transportation system or roads or farming, can you go into more detail about that?
Yeah, I mean, the 16 largest programs that are funded with census data here in Michigan include things like Medicaid, Medicare, food assistance, highway and road fund. I mean, as we know here in Michigan, we can't afford to leave even $1 on the table when it comes to fixing our roads and bridges. It includes Head Start, early Head Start, special ed programs. I mean, the list is very broad and very important. And when you think about not just the government funding that we get here from the federal government, but also businesses and they use these numbers. This could be the difference between whether a community gets a grocery store in their neighborhood,
hospital,
or
Yes.
a hospital is located in a neighborhood, or even a coffee shop. I mean, everybody uses census data, and so to the extent that we can get the most accurate count possible, that benefits every single person in every single community.
Absolutely. So what efforts are you making to make sure that everyone is counted? When does the count start?
So the count starts actually, Census Day is April 1st, 2020. So just a little less than a year from now. And as I said, we started in 2017. Michigan Nonprofit Association received a grant from the Kellogg Foundation. Since then, our campaign has raised more than $5.4 million, and that was more than 40 foundations in the philanthropy community here in Michigan invested in this campaign to involve nonprofits to help the state. And sometimes people ask me, well, isn't this a federal government responsibility or a state responsibility? Why are nonprofits involved in this? And the answer is kind of simple. Actually, there's two reasons. One, as I mentioned, the federal funds that we were talking about. If we don't draw down those federal dollars, communities tend to look towards nonprofits and philanthropy to fill in those gaps. And at that price tag of $1,800 per person and the millions of dollars that represents, there's no way that nonprofits can fill in that kind of a gap. So that's one reason, the funding. But the second reason is there are populations in Michigan that are always undercounted, not just this time, and we can talk about some of the challenges that we're facing with this census, but historically, there are people who are marginalized, who just don't like to interact with the government, who don't feel that their voices are heard, and so they typically don't fill out a census.
Right. Well,
and our campaign is going to focus on those groups.
What you said, this is a public-private partnership. So who else are you engaging to help do the count? Because of those fears, some people are like, oh, I don't know, what is this census about? Who else are you engaging?
So our campaign, when we launched it, it's being co-chaired by my boss, the president and CEO of Michigan Nonprofit Association, Donna Murray Brown, and Hassan Jaber, who is the CEO of Access. And we have brought together more than 40 statewide nonprofit organizations to help us work on this. They represent some of those populations that I alluded to that are historically undercounted. Those populations include people who live in poverty, the immigrant community, some minority populations, people who experience homelessness, and people are very surprised to learn that one of the biggest groups that are undercounted every time are young children, ages 0 to 5.
Why is that?
And so, well, it's interesting because some of the populations that I referred to, children now, there's complicated living arrangements that children have. They live in blended families. Sometimes they're in foster care. Sometimes a grandparent or an extended family member is taking care of them, and so people don't know where they should be counted, or they just simply miss them. They just don't count the young kids. And so our campaign is going to involve a lot of nonprofits that work with these communities to make sure that they're educating the people on how important it is. It's important, yeah, but it's also easy, and it's also very safe to do.
Right. So when you talk about counting homeless, immigrant populations, that's important, but also do you count people who are incarcerated or people who are living in assisted living centers, and is it done in a similar way? Those
groups are counted by the U.S. Census Bureau in what's called a group quarters process. Our campaign, the nonprofit campaign, isn't going to be working on those because the U.S. Census Bureau will count those people with their group quarters enumeration. But you're right, there are a number of kids in college and dorms, and there's all kinds of group quarters that the U.S. Census Bureau has a process for doing that.
Okay. How does one get involved? They say, I keep hearing about this census. Are there any jobs available? What do you do if you want to help as a volunteer or as a paid person?
Yes, there's a lot that can be done. If you want to get involved in the nonprofit campaign or the campaign that the state is going to be launching, you can always go to the website that we've launched. It's called mi2020.com. And there's resources, a tab that lists all kinds of resources, PowerPoints if you want to talk to your community groups. There's documents that list the programs that are that Michigan gets based on census count. There's little flyers like this that can be downloaded and printed, and posters and all kinds of things that anybody can use to get the word out in their community.
Okay, right. So let me make sure I'm clear about this. The count day is April 1, 2020, but we start counting before then, right?
Well, that's a good question.
Okay.
This census is very different from any other census that we've ever done in the past. Okay. So yes, Census Day is April 1st, but starting in, after the first of the year in March, the U.S. Census Bureau is going to be contacting each household with a letter to invite people to fill out the form. This time around, there's 3 different ways to fill out your census before you ever get anybody that comes to your door to ask you why you haven't filled it out yet. The first way is the Internet First model. Okay. For the very first time, people are going to be able to fill out their census via the Internet.
Wow.
Now, while that's going to be a big convenience for a lot of people, it also is going to be kind of difficult for a lot of us. In Michigan, there's about 19-20% of us here that don't have broadband, or we just have dial-up, so there's that access issue.
Right.
But if you don't have internet, or you don't feel comfortable filling out your form on the internet, like if you're a senior, for example, possibly, then you can use the 800 number. There's an 800 number this time around that you can call, and there'll be an actual person on the line that will help you go through and fill out your census form via the phone.
That's very helpful. Even if you have literacy issues and you can't read it or you don't understand the question, you can call and do it. Oh, that's great.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the third way is the way that it has been done in the past, where you got mailed an actual paper form that you fill out and then you mail it back. So there's 3 different ways to fill out the census before any what they call non-response follow-up would happen. Okay. And our campaign, nonprofits and other community leaders are going to try the very best we can to make sure that no matter which way you want to fill it out, that everybody fills it out in that period of time.
And so you only get the person that shows up at your door when you don't turn it in.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the turn-in date is when?
It's going to go all the way up through July. So it'll start, the first waves of invitations in the state will start to happen in March. And the reason why they're doing that in phases is because they don't want the internet, to break, to crash. And so, and the areas, some of our areas in the northern part of the state and others where there's not good broadband service, they won't even get an internet option. They'll just get, hey, here you can fill it out on the phone, or you can fill it out by paper form. So the Census Bureau is kind of trying to be smart about that, and they're going to be sending out all the different invitations, and as soon as that starts to happen, we'll be right there on the ground making sure everybody understands that this is easy, that this is safe, and it's very important.
All right. We're going to take a break right now, but I'm going to come back and we're going to continue this conversation about the census and how you get involved and some of the challenges and concerns that people have had about taking the census. So we'll be right back after this.
If I got to go to college, oh my goodness. I just feel like that's my destiny. You get to make like a supernova of skill or talent or whatever it is. My name is Queen, and I am your dividend.
Looking for a temporary job? The U.S. Census Bureau is hiring thousands of temporary workers across the country to support the 2020 census. To apply online, go to 2020census.gov/jobs or call 1-855-562-2020.
Welcome back to From Lansing with Love. We're here with Joan Gustafson. Did I say that right? Sorry, we got to go back.
Gustafson.
Gustafson.
Mm-hmm.
Gustafson.
All right.
Gustafson.
3, 2.
Welcome back to From Lansing with Love. Gustafson. Okay, I'm ready.
All right, here we go. 3, 2.
Welcome back to From Lansing with Love. We are here with Joan Gustafson, the campaign manager for the Census 2020 Michigan Nonprofits Count campaign. Thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you.
So before the break, we left off, I think, talking about how will people be how can they get engaged in the census and get engaged, being on the staff. They want to be a part of helping count, so making sure that Michigan is well represented in our nation.
Well, there are a lot of ways to get involved, not the least of which is if you would like to work for the U.S. Census Bureau, there are a lot of jobs available right now. The U.S. Census Bureau has to staff up, I don't even know, thousands of workers have to come into the state to make sure that they're partnering with the state government and the nonprofits and other advocacy groups to help us get a good count. So there are going to be 5 offices set up here in Michigan. There's one in Detroit, one in Macomb County, one in Oakland County, one in Lansing, and one in Midland. So in addition to staffing those offices, there are also a number of other jobs that the U.S. Census Bureau is trying to hire for right now. So if you go to their website, you can get, send in your application and get that process going. Also, the city of Detroit has a very ambitious campaign that they've launched, and they're looking for workers too to go door to door and to help people make sure we get a good count in Detroit. In fact, Detroit was the most undercounted major city in the nation last time. And as you mentioned, the mayor and others have a very vested interest to make sure that we get everybody counted in the city of Detroit. There's a lot of opportunities there with their campaign. And then with our campaign as well, the statewide.
And I attended an event for the census that Wayne County Executive Warren Evans held, and the leadership team out of that Detroit office said that there are about 8,000 jobs that they're looking to fill in Metro Detroit, and so that people are able to do that from that website, and also a new way that they're planning on doing the testing, right, and training for people who are going to do the count.
Yeah, that the U.S. Census Bureau representatives would be better equipped to answer those questions. I do know, though, that you're right. They're trying to hire right now thousands of workers, and they really want people to work in the neighborhoods and be from the area that needs to be counted, because that's the best way to encourage people to do it, is if your neighbors and friends and people you already know are telling you, how important this is.
Right.
So,
And that kind of goes into those challenges and barriers that people have. There's been a lot of questions about citizenship, and if I fill out the census, then people will know where I am, and will an ICE van show up at this place? What is the census doing, and what's the message that you need to put out there about confidentiality and citizenship and things like that?
Yep, that is a good question. It has been an issue. It was very controversial when the Secretary of Commerce decided to insert that citizenship question into this census at a very late date. It was not tested. The citizenship question hasn't been used in the decennial census since the 1950s. And so our campaign took a position against including it. We didn't think it was necessary, and we did feel that it would discourage some people from filling out the survey from different, fears that they may have that the information might be shared with other federal departments. Now, the U.S. Census Bureau is strictly prohibited from sharing any individual information that they gather in the census with any other government agencies, whether that would be ICE or whether that would be state, Department of Health and Human Services, Community Health, or any other departments. It is strictly prohibited. The law is Title 13, and a Census Bureau worker, if they ever did share any of that information, they could go to prison and they could be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that piece of it is strictly controlled. However, some people still have a lot of distrust in the government, and not just immigrant communities, but others who feel that government is too nosy and they're not interested in dealing with the government. So those are challenges that we recognize, but we're also trying to tell people the benefits are what they are, the risks are what they are. Our campaign wants to make sure that we're being extremely honest and transparent so that everyone can make their decision for themselves what to do for their personal.
So this data is not only shared, is not shared with government departments, but also not marketing firms either, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. This is just for the decennial census, just for data and statistics, and cannot be shared with any other department.
Okay. Are you able to speak to how to make sure that the people who may show up at your door are legitimate census folk and not an imposter or some scam artist?
Well, and that too is one of the things that we're trying to decrease the number of people that have to go to door by encouraging people to fill out their census in one of the other 3 ways that we talked about. But if you get to a point where there are either volunteers, because there could be people that are maybe volunteer from the city of Detroit that are talking in neighborhoods and asking people to fill out their forms that aren't actual U.S. Census Bureau workers. They may be volunteers. But U.S. Census volunteers will have all the credentials that they're required to have in order to take census data. The volunteers, either on the nonprofits or the volunteers either from different cities or whatever, they can't fill out a census form for a person, but they can assist.
Okay.
And they can encourage people to fill it out. They can assist people to fill it out.
And I'm glad, because I was going to ask you if you're going to have a marketing campaign so everyone will know to start looking around March, is it? For the real, you should receive something. And
that's correct.
Okay.
This fall we are going to do some marketing to kind of start to tell people, hey, it's coming, get ready for this. We'll do that in the fall, then it'll kind of drop down at the end of the year, and then it'll ramp back up again in March and April. But the media and ad campaign is going to be very important because we're going to be competing with a lot of things next spring, not to mention the presidential primaries. There's an Olympics that's going to be happening during that time, and that's just in addition to all the other news and information that people get on a daily basis. So you're right, the media and ad campaign and making sure that we're all in this together and we're all telling our communities and our families, you know, to do this. It's going to take all of us to make this a big success for Michigan.
I have to tell you, the Michigan Nonprofit Count campaign, I think, has done an outstanding job. I don't remember, even though it was a decade ago since we did this the last time, this type of ramp up before doing the count. And I think you've been very deliberative and intentional in the planning and execution to make sure Michigan is counted. And I want to go back to something we said earlier in the show about its importance in terms of government. And how we lost a congressional seat. And when we talk about how the districts are broken out here, even in Michigan. So I represent the city, portion of the city of Detroit and all of Redford Township. There are 15 between the House and the Senate elected officials representing the city of Detroit. After this census, depending on that count, that number could decrease.
Yes.
Maybe it will increase. But that affects everyone. And if I can hear from you, because I think, you know, you're boots on the ground here too. If you can, because I'm the elected, people say, oh, you're just trying to protect your job. But please talk a little bit more about why that's so important. Who we send to Washington, D.C., who's serving in the Capitol in Lansing.
Yeah, I mean, it is really utterly important. I mean, the more people that we have, the more powerful we are. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So when the census count happens in, say, spring, you know, March, April, May, actually it'll go all the way through July that people will have a chance to do this of 2020. By the end of that year, all the numbers will go to the president. And then Michigan will get their numbers in March of 2021. So it is a process. But based on those numbers, based on how many representatives that we have, and if you care about a hospital in your neighborhood, if you care about a community center, if your children or if your child takes advantage of Head Start or special ed or whatever, the representation piece is huge, but the federal funding is huge. I mean, this is real money for real programs.
Right.
I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but Michigan's state budget is made up of more than 40% of federal funds. So when we're not pulling down the federal funds that we're entitled
That's
to,
right.
the state budget is going to suffer as well. And all the other states are competing for the same pool of money.
Absolutely.
So if Michigan doesn't do a good job, some other state is going to get the funding. So to your point, we learned after 2010 that if we get out early on this, we have a much better chance of getting a better count than some of our other neighboring states. Okay. And so I will say that Michigan is a national leader in this area. We got out early. We have a very coordinated, ambitious campaign. And so I'm really hoping that with all of us working together, that this is going to be a huge success for us. We have to make it a success.
I feel it coming. I feel it coming, and I'm so excited about this census. I plan to be as involved, and that's why I wanted to do this show, because it really is very exciting to work in government and see how that really matters and makes a difference in the state, and those dollars that come down from the federal government to the programming that we're able to offer to Medicare, Medicaid that we talk about too. All of it's related to this count. We only get to do it once in a decade, right?
That's right.
So this is my last kind of question on the census itself. Joe, please tell us, is taking the census hard? Is it a lot of questions?
Taking the census is very easy. Okay. One of the things I tell people is that most people's social media profiles have way more information than what is going to be asked of you on the U.S. Census form. So let me just make sure I get this right. Here are they're just so easy. It'll ask your name, your gender, your age, your birthday, what race you are, what ethnicity you are, the relationship to the head of household, whether you own or rent, and your phone number. So that's it. They're not very intrusive questions. They're very basic questions. And they say the little tagline they're using is 10 questions, 10 minutes for 10 years.
Wait, there's only 10 questions on the census?
That's correct.
Anyone who does not take the census, I am concerned about you. Call me. I will help you. This is amazing. Okay, so we're happy, we're excited to take the census. Before we go, is there any last thing you want to share with our audience?
I would like to tell people that if you want to get involved or just to see what we're up to and how your community can get involved, go to our website. It's BeCountedMI2020.com. We send out a Monday morning little newsletter. It talks about the different complete count committees that are being set up and different kickoffs in different communities. It has webinars. It has like the latest on different policy issues and what the state is doing, what the federal government is doing, and whatever. And it's really quick, and you can just get a good read on what's going on with it.
I am so honored to have you, and thank you and all the people who work on the census this decade and this season, the census season. So that's about all the time we have today. But I just want folks watching to know that there are a lot of opportunities for you to get involved in this campaign and in different capacities, whether you're a volunteer, you're a paid staff, you're a door counter, you're a person that answers the phone, or you're the person that brings a lot of encouragement and cheer. All hands on deck for this census campaign. Let's make Michigan the #1 state to deliver on that count. So again, I'd like to thank my special guest, Ms. Joan Gustafson, the campaign manager for the Census 2020 Michigan Nonprofit Counts Campaign, for joining us, and thank all of you for watching. If you have an idea for a show, please contact my office. That contact information will be on the screen. So until next time, be good to yourself and each other. And with that, we're all clear and out of here. Take care.